Welcome to Unite Now, where we bring unity to you, wherever you are.
Hi, my name is Ashley Alicea. I'm a games evangelist at Unity, and I'm very excited to welcome you all to today's edition of Meet the Devs, where we're talking to Unity's demo team. Now, the demo team focuses on pushing the limits of what's possible to achieve with Unity through their work on creative projects using the editor. So you might know them as the folks behind Adam or Book of the Dead. So in this webinar, you're going to get to meet two of the team members behind the Heretic and see kind of how they brought it to life. In today's presentation, what we're going to do is, we're going to have a brief introduction to the team. We're going to talk a little bit about the Heretic and show a quick preview for those of you who haven't seen it yet. And then we're just going to have kind of like a long form Q&A with the folks at the demo team while they answer popular community questions that we hear about the Heretic, whether that's at Unity events or on social media or on the forums. We're going to answer some of those kind of like top questions about the Heretic and kind of click around live in the editor as we're going through them. Then we have a special announcement to share at the end, and then we're opening the floor up for public Q&A. So all of you here in the chat today can ask your questions to all of us, and then we can answer them here live in the Zoom call. Again, keep in mind, if you're going to ask a question, please use the Zoom Q&A panel down below. If you ask in the chat window, we may not see it. So definitely be sure to use that Q&A window. So with that, who is here on this webinar? Again, my name is Ashley Alicea. I'm a games evangelist at Unity. And basically kind of what I do is I'm a professional Unity geek. I go to different events. Well, I used to, not anymore. I go to virtual events now, and I talk to developers about the latest Unity features and help them get excited about what's coming up in the editor. And I'm also joined by two of my colleagues on Unity's demo team. And then go ahead and introduce yourselves. Say hi, Robert.
Yeah, hey. So this is Robert. I was the technical lead on this production. I've been at Unity for over 10 years now, since we were a small company, like just 40 people or something like that. And I specialize in graphics programming, in rendering, in lighting and visual effects. And that's what I've been doing on this demo. And I also made the Boston character. So yeah, Krasi?
My name is Krasimir Nechevski, and I'm the animation director for the Unity demo team. I started in 2015, and the first project I worked on was Adam Part 1. In the team, I'm responsible for tasks related to animation, such as character rigging, motion capture animation. Also executing the director's vision, the Selena frame in the form of previews, edit, and cameras. For the Heretic, besides the usual things, me and our character artist Plamen were also responsible for developing the 4D pipeline on the asset side and in close collaboration with my teammate Lasse, making it work in Unity.
Amazing. I love how between the both of you, we just have such a wealth of knowledge to share with everyone today. And of course, there's lots to discuss, but let's go ahead and actually show a quick preview of the Heretic for those who haven't seen it yet.
Go take a look. Yeah. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so there you have a little clip of the Heretic. If you haven't seen the full film already, you have to check it out. It's on the Unity YouTube channel. But if you're here, I'm assuming that you've seen it, you're excited. Let's go ahead and start talking about the project with some Q&A with the demo team. So Robert, Krasimir, tell me, so the Heretic kind of came forth out of very specific inspirations and goals for the project. Can you tell us more about kind of what inspired this whole project?
Yeah, so we've been making demos for quite a while now, and our team has a mission that's kind of twofold. One is to tell, hopefully interesting and hopefully interesting stories and stories that are visually inspiring, but also, through the process of making those demos, improve Unity itself. So we always initially set out to make projects which you can't really make in Unity yet, and through the process of working with R&D and developing our own solutions, we kind of we make it possible at the end. The demo gets made, and all the improvements that we kind of developed along the way make it back to the engine. So one important thing with telling stories, though, is that it's really good to have a human character in the story, because it's really hard to make people care about, I don't know, like a story about a rock, right? Unless, I guess, the rock has eyes and a mouth and it's smiling. But we've been dodging the subject by when we made the Adam demo, it was a robotic body, right? It didn't have a face that was emoting, maybe just visible the moving eyes. And in Blacksmith, we kind of just painted the face white and was motionless, and was also kind of dodging the subject of an animated face. But we thought that maybe with this demo we won't be evading the subject anymore, and we will actually try to tell a story with a human, and with a human that has a face. So that was the tentpole feature of this demo, the key thing that we knew that we wanted to make work. But we also had opportunity to do a bunch of other things. So we thought it would be interesting to create those entirely VFX-based characters. So we have Boston, and we have Morgan as well, the entirely VFX-based. We had lots of opportunity to work with the HDRP, with the new lights, with new volumetrics, materials, and so on. So lots of things to showcase.
Lots of things indeed. And, can you, about that goal for creating a digital human, tell us more about that process. How did you go about actually creating that digital human and bringing it to Unity?
When we started, we knew it was a very hard task, and I had to find the right methods to do it. So there are many ways to do humans, but mostly they fail, and to make it completely believable. And there's this uncanny valley concept that if you do it close but not close enough, the human starts looking very awkward and unpleasant. To avoid that, we decided the usual methods would be rigging the character with a lot of blend shapes, which are extreme poses. Another method might be simulating the skin, maybe. And another, the one that we decided to go at, it was basically it's called 4D, because it's like photogrammetry per frame, which is basically a 3D video of a person doing so there is no warping of the performance of any kind. Usually when 4D is also used in the other methods, but there is algorithms that analyze the data and try to convert it into rig control motion, make it into blend shapes. But this usually warps the data, and there is the performance is not 100% correct. In order to avoid that, we decided to go with the capturing the human, like a 3D video, which I'll explain a bit later. But let me first mention some stats about the character. So the vertex count for the head was 28K, the body was 57, the jacket was simulated and brought in as alembic. The vertex count was 43K. The joints are like just around 100. The jacket design was made in Marvelous. So we tried making it, the jacket, we tried making it inside of Unity, but it didn't quite meet the level of detail we wanted to hit. So we ended up making it in Marvelous and bringing it as an alembic. And it's just this piece of the character is an alembic. This here you can see the pattern in Marvelous and how the design looked there. We also needed a facial rig. Like I want to, like we don't really use the facial rig in terms of the blend shapes. We actually use it just to solve our data on, to get the high level detail in the form of wrinkle maps. So the blend shapes of the rig are like 318. The textures are the usual albedo, normal cavity and thickness, etc. They are 4K resolution. There are like 48 different activation masks that are used to activate different, to mark different areas of the face, so the wrinkle maps can be activated, such as the forehead, the crow feet around the eyes, etc. We have 16 additional wrinkle maps that are all a combination of albedo, normal, and cavity. So I want to talk about our process a bit more, which is not very standard. We start with capturing the actor in a light stage, not light stage, but in a photogrammetry rig that captures the performance at up to 60 FPS. So after we capture the data, the raw is very noisy and there is a lot of cleanup to be done. A similar method was used before, but we decided to try it again and push it as much as we could. So while capturing the 4D, we also captured the neutral plus a lot of fax shapes to make the rig. After the raw data is collected, it's very, the geometry is not consistent. There is bugs. The UV doesn't make sense. So this needs to be put into temporally coherent meshes, into a temporally coherent mesh which fits the neutral face. That is done, like first we tried to make it in-house for like more than half a year, but then by accident we met the guys that were responsible for the software that we use to do it. It's called RAP3D and it's developed by a Russian 3D scanner, and the guys decided to collaborate with us. So I will show you some videos of how the data, the steps that the data goes through. So first, that's how the actor looks like in the photogrammetry rig. This is done by Infinite Realities. Then the data, here you can see the quality. This one particular piece was done more than a year ago, and we first decided to go with a very short segment, just 7 seconds, to see how it all works. But then we were pretty happy with the results. So for the second part, we added a lot more, and actually we became very proficient at doing this. And for the second part, there was more than 30 seconds, or almost a minute. So as you can see here, there's a lot of noise, and some of the data is occluded, like where there's hairs. The photogrammetry doesn't work very well when there's occlusion, or when there's like specularity, or like inside the mouth, under the nose. There's just these areas that need to be cleaned. So after then the data gets wrapped with this software called Wrap 3D, and then the head motion needs to be removed. Because if you see on the left, the head tilts, and on the right, this is removed. So we can put it on our neutral mesh. And this way, we can also mix with the rig controls. So we can add on top corrections if we need to. We didn't need to, we didn't want to, but we could. And also this allows, one of the initial ideas was to go in and out of 4D almost seamlessly. Like the character is in the background, he's just blinking or something, and then the camera zooms in, for example, and you go into 4D mode when you play this bit of data, and then you go out of it seamlessly. But we didn't end up using it. So that's another clip that shows just with shading. The data is clear. This is after all the cleanup is done, and that's what we are left with. At the second batch of animations, the studio, the vendor, improved their tech quite a lot. So now we have much better data, but still you can see the shiny parts, the places where there's hair, they're pretty, the data is noisy and inconsistent. This needs to be cleaned. So, yes. That's the same thing with textures. Looking at this, it was, to me, it was kind of obvious that our choices were kind of in the right direction, at least, because even with all the books and everything, there is no real uncanny valley. It doesn't look unnatural or dead or warped. It's just the actor performance. There are glitches, of course, but I think it's a good way to avoid uncanny valley. So after we get the data, a lot of things happen in Unity. Afterwards, which there will be another webinar next week where my colleague Lasse will explain about the Unity side of things, the technical problems that need to be solved there. It's like the hair, there are like little hairs on his head and on his beard that they need to follow the mesh. There's like eyelashes, shaders, eye shaders, and all of these you can learn next week. Also, we are releasing a package, the digital human package, where you can see a sample data and one animation, all the bones and the whole setup. I think that's everything I want to say about the human.
I love how much work went into creating Gawain, and we hadn't even jumped into the Unity side yet. I think a common question that we get from our community is, what is required to create a character like that in Unity? What do I make to bring, in? I'm excited that there's going to be a whole talk for this next week where people can learn all the details. This looks awesome. So, kind of speaking of our community, I want to share one of the questions that we got on the Q&A side over on the forums. And so we have user UMaker asking, and I think this question is also going to be like a really good intro to some of y'all's favorite aspect of this project. But they're asking for something that is constantly changing, like the bird. Are you bending those lines manually between each frame? Or do you set some kind of wiggle protocol to waver within certain constraints and then see if you like how it turned out? How did we get those wires to move around the scene?
All right, I can answer that. So let's see. Let's find a good shot. So Boston is made out of thousands and thousands of wires, and of course we weren't animating them by hand. So what we did is that there's this core element that is common to most forms of Boston, which is a tentacle, and a tentacle is that's one example, right? And a tentacle is just a sequence of bones, and in some cases these were pre-animated. So like only these bones that you see here were animated by. I don't remember if these ones in particular were animated by Krasimir. And then we kind of these act as guides for pushing all these wires along, right? So then wires are spawned at the beginning, and they kind of like travel along this chain of bones. But as they travel, they conform to the surface and to the obstacles and whatnot. Let's see how that looks like. So if we move one of the bones a little bit, you can see that the wires react. And I'm not kind of like placing individual wires, but they still behave sensibly. Let's see, maybe we can see another form. This is the dream catcher, and you can see that it's as the conditions for and the different forces that are working that are affecting the wires as they change, it kind of like procedurally tries to conform to these sign distance fields that define where the walls are, but also those fields which control, which kind of like contort and twist the wires here. So let's see, for instance, this guy. If we move it like this, you can see how it kind of affects those twists, right? So again, we weren't really touching individual wires. We were like twisting and turning them with forces and with SDFs. Maybe we can see. Oh yeah, and this is the visualization of the SDF that we have baked for the corridors. So you see the kind of it gets dark so close to zero as it approaches the wall and any obstacle, and then it gets purple when it's on the other side, when it's negative. And then this is how the wires know to avoid the obstacles and kind of conform to them. So yeah,
that's awesome. I love how much time you're saving with this process, right? And how quickly you can make these edits. Like when you were showing the waypoints along the wall, being able to just completely change, the path of the wires and more is so cool.
Yeah, it was really interesting to work with it like that. Like another example here is the Golem, and the Golem, you can kind of see that it's just a human figure, and then we have same as with the previous example with the corridor. We have let's see. Let me find the actual shot. Right now, we're actually between shots, so that's another thing that we can show. There's we have this continuity track, which allows us to basically skip time, so we don't have to cut out the animate. We don't have to like precisely cut the animations which you don't see. We can just kind of choose the moments in time which are interesting to us, right? So let's see. We have this Golem character. And and it's an animated character, right? So that of course means that the distance field that the wires are conforming to needs to be dynamic as well. Let's see if we can find it real quick. So this is the visualization for the distance field for one of the wings, and you can see, okay, so it's dark. That's where we're close to the wing, and as the wings move, you see it kind of updating in real time. And this is how the wires know that this is what they need to weave around. And same goes for the human figure as well.
Nice.
It's yeah.
It's so, you know, seeing how you can make all these changes in real time, and you were also just showing that awesome track that you have in Unity Timeline. You know, how you created a film in what's traditionally a game engine, right? How does your experience for the both of you, you know, when creating the Heretic, how has that compared to traditional workflows for, you know, for animated films? You know, what's different? What did you learn in that process?
Krasi, you want to take that one?
I can answer that. Well, usually with the classic approach is to start with a script, make a storyboard, approve it, followed by an animatic, and then execute it. There's like some space for changes, but not that much. Making it in real time is very, very different. Basically, the whole time you are in previs mode until very late. Like, you can change anything you want, and very often we end up doing so. Very often, even the day before, we add new shots, we remove shots, or we, for example, what Robert is showing now, Boston was actually descending in the next shot. Robert, in the next couple of shots, Boston was descending from above, and we decided it didn't look good. And now and then we changed it to like he landed in the background somewhere, which we made in just like half an hour. This freedom gives you like, it unties your hands, and you can iterate all you want until the very, very end. So that's very different from the usual methods, and I find it liberating and super nice.
No kidding. It's just awesome. And you know, being able to see all those changes like happen instantly, it lets you spend more time just doing what you love, being creative and making kind of this awesome project. You know, as you're going through this scene, you know, I'm looking at Boston. I'm remembering that scene kind of earlier in the Heretic where Boston rips open those two metal doors. We've had several community members ask how that was achieved. Could you tell us a bit more about that process?
Yes, this was a simulation done in Maya and imported as an Alembic. We try to use Alembic only as a last resort, only on things that we cannot do otherwise inside of Unity. So, yeah, it was very straightforward, just simulate it and export it. And for the purpose, we had to create our little Alembic player, which was based on Unity Japan's Alembic player. We created, additionally, we had to create an Alembic track for, Robert is showing it now, Alembic track for the timeline. That's it.
Nice. Yeah, it's you know, looking at the timeline as Robert was opening that Olympic track, the this is a big project. It's using many different timeline tracks. How was this organized using timeline? How did you structure this project?
It was very, like when we started, the nesting of timeline tracks was not very stable. So we decided to, so it's not, I wouldn't advise anyone doing it exactly how we did it, but it was due to limitations at the time. Later we got nested timeline tracks, and we used them to separate the different timelines, like lights from cameras, from action. But ultimately it's one long track, and in order to add it, we had to make the previously mentioned discontinuity track that Robert showed before, which we can edit non-destructively. Other than that, it's kind of messy, but that's one byproduct of being able to work freely. You just end up iterating and concentrating on the content rather than like the structure. Like you can end up in a not very structured situation.
For sure. Also, I'm curious because as you were going through the timeline, I realized that this project uses both motion capture cameras and Cinemachine cameras. Why not make the whole project using Cinemachine cameras?
It's true that in Cinemachine there is you can add noise to the camera, so it looks like handheld, but it's not exactly the same. We wanted to make a visual difference, like a subtle visual difference between the part where Gawain is still in one world and after when he goes through the portal and ends up in the other world. We wanted to make a difference in the way the cameras are shot. So for the second part, we used Cinemachine to achieve nice, synthetic, smooth curves and camera motions. And for the first part, we wanted to be more organic and feel like the viewer is there with the character, and getting the feeling, the authentic feeling of an organically shot handheld camera is not that easy. In my opinion, it cannot be achieved only with adding noise, because you can see all the details and imperfections. Like you can actually see the camera operator's footsteps in the motion. You can see like he cannot perfectly trace the objects, like so there is like slight delay, and that's why it looks organic compared to the second part, which is synthetically smooth cameras.
Cool.
So actually, I wanted to mention one thing because
sure.
we're talking about how we're using the timeline, and the interesting bit is this. So basically, the entire film is divided in shots, and we have varying lighting. Lighting varies from shot to shot quite a bit. Let's see how it looks like in the scene view, maybe if I can find it quickly. So this is this shot, and if I kind of scroll in the scene view, and if I scroll the timeline, you see that, well, the lights are changing quite drastically. As like this is lighting for the reverse shot, right? And this is for the overview shot. And we have we kind of achieved it in two ways. So one of our programmers on the team, Malte, he developed what we call the Scene Manager Suite, and it has a bunch of timeline extensions. One of them is scene properties track and scene properties clips, which basically, so if you know about the volume framework in Unity, the one that the post-processing is built on, where you kind of can place volumes around the scene, and then whenever the camera enters the volume, then whatever this volume is controlling gets kind of alert in and starts influencing what's happening, blending with other volumes. You can have global volumes and so on, but volumes are primarily like a space thing, right? They can be placed somewhere and then triggered, or like they start influencing what's going on when the camera enters them. Of course, we're in a film like this, we're interested in controlling things by time or by script. So the scene properties track, that's what it does. So you can have clips which refer to which kind of extend the functionality of the volumes. So you can see, and as a byproduct, everything that's controlled by volume. So for instance, the post-processing effects. So you can see here different clips with different settings for the post effects, and they can be, right now they're just like switching here, but you can see they can even be blending, and that was one way to kind of extend the timeline. But the other, and here that's kind of useful when you want to control like individual things. So if you want to control depth of field, or if you wanted to like add a light to one of the volumes and add the light to another volume, and then kind of blend between their influence. But another thing that's even more common is to have like in this case we have a bunch of lights and maybe some like props here and there, being basically their property, their enabled, disabled, or their properties switched. And we have another track for that, the snapshot track and snapshot clips, and that allows basically to set up lighting for a given shot in one way, capture that data into the clip data, and then kind of like scrap to another shot, set up different lighting, snapshot that, and this is what controls our lights and kind of in bulk. And then similarly we can kind of see it here, but the different like jacket players being played, different jackets being switched over as we move over to subsequent shots, and we of course use it for Boston as well. So if you take a look here, we can see like one set of wires is enabled now, and as we switch over to this shot, there's another set of wires. But these are just done with the built-in activation tracks. So just disabling and enabling groups of game objects. So yeah, so this is how we kind of structure our shots.
So as you were demoing that, I was going through the Q&A panel. We have a lot of user questions and not that much time left. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you some of the things that the community is asking, but someone's actually asking something specific to what you just showed. Right now when you were changing those types of volumes inside a timeline, those are handled via Cinemachine for the post-processing, correct?
No, Cinemachine, we actually don't use Cinemachine in this part of the film that much. We use Cinemachine in the second part, and we only use Cinemachine to control the camera. So Cinemachine is good at creating those like synthetic camera movements, which Krasimir was talking about initially, and so those like sweeping motions and orbits and whatnot. So that's what we use Cinemachine for.
All right, going through the questions. Someone's asking, will the Alembic player and the Alembic track be available for the general user base anytime soon?
Oh, it's already available. Unity Japan published the player. I suppose we could also publish our extensions to it. but we're actually internally working on yet another version that we think will improve it quite substantially. And of course, we will publish that as soon as it's generally usable. This is generally the theme that sometimes it's difficult for us to release entire projects, but we definitely like to release packages of tools which are useful to people and can be reused directly.
I think that touches upon another community question that we have in the Q&A right now. So someone had asked, so is the Heretic being used as a test case for the engine and making updates to it internally?
Oh yes, definitely. That's what I was mentioning in the beginning. Basically, the whole half of our team's mission is to actually work on projects which are specifically designed to improve the engine. So we deliberately try to make things which are very difficult or impossible to do in the engine yet, and then work with R&D to as R&D develops specific features which we directly use in the project. We also encourage R&D engineers to grab our project and test their new features directly in kind of like a real world, like, this is like a 300 gig project, right? It's not the same as testing a feature with a cube on a plane, and everything is different in a project like this. And I think that's a very valuable way to work. And also, honestly, it's a way to make sure that features work before they, before we give them to our users. And there's always so many things that we discover and just using features in a real production. I think it's a good process.
Awesome. Let's see, what else has the community asked? Here's one. I see the DA stream player proxy as you were doing your demo. This is an old signature for ECS editor scripts. So were portions of this project done with the entity component system?
Yeah, so specifically the Alembic player was extended a little bit to use some dots features. And this project started before ECS, or like dots, but back then it was basically just ECS before it was really usable. So the entire project is built on like the old tech stack, mono behavior and whatnot, but we use so we've only used dots as an extension for the Alembic mesh stream player, and then certain digital human, so certain features for the digital human leverage the job system, some editor tooling and some runtime stuff, like for instance the attachment system. So the system that makes sure that all the hair on Wayne that he has stays attached. So that's running using the job system.
Nice. So we have a bunch of people asking about, did we create custom SSS shaders? Did, lots of questions about Gwain and, shader graph and, was HDRP lit used or custom HDRP shaders? Sounds like all of those people should definitely check out next week's session. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
Yes.
Yeah, we like next week, or is it next week or in 2 weeks? Lasse will be talking in depth about all the shading, but there's a lot of ground to cover. He's going to be talking about skin shading, how we develop the shader for the eyes. There's a very interesting bit about how the kind of the tear line. So this little like wet line that connects the eyeball with the lower lid. To make like a softer, softer transition, like to add this little glint, how that was created. the SSS, which mostly relies on the built-in HDRP SSS effect. All those things will be covered during the next session.
Perfect. And for those of you who are interested in seeing that session, I believe we posted a link in the chat. I could be wrong. But it's basically if you go to the Unite Now page on the Unity website, you'll see the information for the second part of this session there. So definitely be sure to catch that. Let's see, lots more questions. Going through them now. We only have about 10 minutes left. So, you know what, why don't we, since we only have 10 minutes, I do want to talk about kind of one of my favorite aspects of this project, because it's using one of my favorite Unity features. And I think, Robert, it's kind of one of your favorite things about this as well. You know, you were talking about Boston, the bird, and you mentioned that there were two types of different visual effects applied into this experience. So one of them was created with code, and the other one was created with Unity's visual effect graph feature, which is used for that big finale character that you just showed a minute ago, Morgan. So why did you use VFX graph for Morgan and not Boston, or vice versa?
So that's a good question. So we kind of, you know, Unity is Unity is a good tool for artists, but I mean, I'm a programmer. I like to make my own tools, and that's the nice thing about Unity, that it's quite easy to make your own tool. So you can make, you can make scene gizmos, you can make all sorts of extensions to the editor. So I was kind of interested in simulating all of this procedural behavior. This is, by the way, like the gauntlet as well. That's using the same tech, just kind of modified slightly to wrap around the gauntlet there. So that's a very interesting exercise as well. But of course, for our technical artist Adrian, who created the Morgan character, it was, for him, it made much more sense to use the VFX graph, and it was also, this feature came quite late during the production of the Heretic. So we were using VFX graph as it was heavily being developed. And let's see, we can actually take a look at, let's see. We can look at the other project, the specific Morgan project that we're preparing for release as well. So for Adrian, it was a pretty interesting experience in developing this VFX character. Just like with Boston, developing VFX characters is kind of difficult, because you can't concept effectively that character. One reason is that, well, first of all, it's difficult to draw by hand something like that, right? It's just it's usually a lot of detail, because, well, that's the interesting part of it. And the other reason is that the whole point, I would guess, in making a VFX based character is that in those systems, in those kind of like procedural systems, simulations and whatnot, there's going to be a lot of very interesting emergent behavior, and the emergent behavior is particular to the system that you're working with. So it makes much more sense to kind of organically explore where your technical design is taking you, rather than upfront define like rigid boundaries and then kind of hit your head against them, because what you set out is not possible to achieve using the tools that you have, right? So, but that kind of worked quite well with the usual style of production that we follow the demo team that we create things very organically. We iterate on them a lot. So initially, Ves's concepts and visions are quite rough, and he just kind of like paints or like sets up interesting situations where we can then kind of put something visually impressive, something that will be interesting to show, and an interesting element to the story. So the story still has to make sense, so it cannot be just anything, it cannot be random. So when developing this character, Adrian had to work quite closely with Ves, but still it was kind of like this back and forth process. And similarly with Boston, we didn't know how it's going to look like in the beginning. We discovered it in the process by like iteratively seeing how it looks like in the shots, improving on it, pushing it towards the direction that we thought would be interesting.
I love it. Sorry, I didn't know if I interrupted someone else, but I love that you can just start creating a character like Boston, like not even being fully sure how it look like, and just form it into like kind of like the awesome creation that it was, because you have the flexibility to kind of do those iterative tweaks, and that's awesome. And you're showing Morgan, and I'm just blown away by the effects being used on Morgan, and it reminds me that while I've been kind of like in the past on the road at different Unity events or talking about the Heretic online with our community, the number one question I get all the time is, how can everyone get their hands on the assets for the Heretic? And so I actually want to tell everybody that we have some really great news for all of you, and that's the digital human package is now available through the Unity Asset Store or our GitHub. And the VFX character package comes out next week. So this means you'll be able to get the assets for Gawain and Morgan, so you can open them up in your own project, see how they were made, see what features were used, and you can learn how to create similar characters for your own projects. So you can download the digital human package today. Let me go ahead and actually share. I'm going to share my screen. If Robert, you can turn off yours. And so there you have it. So if you want to download the digital human package, it's that link right at the bottom. I'm going to move my Zoom window if I can. Well, anyway, so it's u3d.as/1SAT. Check out the digital human package, download it, especially those of you who are asking questions about shaders and kind of very specific questions about Gawain. You definitely want to download that package. Check it out, and then join us for our follow-up session where we talk about all of the rendering and HDRP usage and more in this project. So you'll have kind of even more tailored questions to share with the team. If you want to learn more about the Heretic, you can visit our landing page there, so unity3d.com/the-heretic. And we're going to go ahead and try to answer as many questions as we can from the Q&A panel. But if we don't get a chance to answer your question live, do not worry. We have a forum thread that we're going to keep open for the next couple of days, where you can post your question, and then we'll make sure that it gets answered there in the forum for sure. So that's over at bit.ly/hereticqa. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this. We only have a few minutes left. We may be going over time, but I definitely want to try to answer a couple more questions before we go. So I'll go ahead and make sure that these links will be posted in the chat. But I will also stop sharing my screen now so I can go ahead and see all the questions that are coming in. All right, there's a lot. So I'm going to pick a couple. There's one that someone just asked, could you guys tell us how the team collaborated working on the same timeline? Did you use a versioning tool like Git or Perforce?
Yes, we used SVN, and we split the timeline into sections by area, kind of. So there was one timeline for lighting, there was one nested timeline for cameras, a different for VFX, and another. So everybody the person responsible for each area would work in their own one.
Yeah, even though we were in such a big team, maybe around like 13 people, there would be tons of collisions if we didn't. So for instance, we have like, so I mostly, so this is the Boston scene, and Boston has its own timeline. It's the nested timeline that's right here. And when working with Boston, only those two things need to be committed. And we would use, SVN's locking to make sure that we lock the files that we work on. Same for kind of working with lighting, would mostly involve touching the lighting timeline and the specific, the throne room lighting scene, for instance. So yeah, a pretty good process, but it's important to split up everything into rather fine chunks in the beginning. I wouldn't recommend working with Git in such a big. This is like 160 gigs of that is the project size, and then other libraries another 160 gigs. So I wouldn't want to work in GitHub even with the large files extension. I don't think that's really a good idea. So that's why we chose SVN. Their options are like Perforce or maybe Plastic. Hopefully one day.
On this topic, another community question: what other additional software was used to create the Heretic? So you mentioned a couple already, like Maya, Marvelous, and what else has been used?
Work 3D. Some people prefer to work in 3D Max. Motion Builder for animation cleanup, mocap cleanup. What else? Photoshop, obviously. Substance for textures. I think that's it. I'm probably forgetting something.
Visual Studio Code.
A lot of that. Okay, let's see. Is there a way to see?
And Houdini, of course. For the VFX character, a lot of Houdini.
Awesome. So someone's asking, is there a way to see or get a list of public packages used in this project?
Public packages. There's no list. We can answer this question on the forum and kind of list everything specifically.
We'll go ahead and do that for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Someone is also asking, maybe this one will be for the forum as well, but I see that a week ago on the Heretic lighting features video that was released, you're using a custom script for the sun for scattering called Atmospheric Scattering Sun. Is this something that you are planning on releasing? The sun scattering looked really good in this project.
This specific script we actually have released a bunch of years ago. It was used it was created for one of our first demos, the blacksmith, and it has been for quite a while on the asset store. We can link to it as well. Perfect. It's undergone some modifications to work with the latest version of HDRP to like hook into it well. But I think if people are interested in it, we can definitely release the latest version of it.
Excellent. Well, we are definitely over time. I wish we could take the rest of the questions. I think we answered kind of the majority of them, at least in a general sense. But again, if you want your question answered by the Unity demo team, please come visit us over on the forums. We just posted a link over in the chat where you could find us. We'll be there for the next few days to help with any questions you may have. Again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. There will be, someone just asked, will there be a recording of this? There will be. So we're going to post this talk over on the Unity YouTube channel about a week and a half-ish from now. So check back then, it'll be there. thank you so much for joining. Check out the digital human package. Check out the visual effect character package when it comes out next week. Really exciting things. I'm so glad that we're finally able to share them with you all. We've been dying to. I know a lot of you have been dying to get them. So it's here. Have fun. Stay safe, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And thank you so much, Robert and Krasimir, for joining on today's session. It's been excellent for the community to hear from you all.
Thanks for tonight. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
All right, we're signing off. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Have a great day. Bye.